Yeah, looks.
Hello. I don't know if I assume other people will join us over the next minute or two. So let's give people another couple of minutes before we talk through things.
Sure thing.
Maybe there was
Yeah.
confusion and people think that this week we're also doing it async.
Oh yeah, since the email updated 2 weeks ahead, that makes sense.
I'd ask you probing personal questions, but we're recording, so I'll shy away from that for now.
Can you hear something in my background? Oh, okay.
I don't know why.
There's some upset children in my house right now, so.
Our
How's
kid
that
just
happen?
came home from his first day of daycare, so.
Oh,
Ooh, Nick's here. All right, should we get started? I don't know who else is joining. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 14th Maintainership Working Group meeting. We're going to cover changes since last time. Steve, you want to go ahead?
sure. So I proposed some labels that will help us to facilitate and organize communication of these changes that we're all working on. I'll ping the working group Slack channel when they're all merged and like finalized. But for all the DRIs, if you haven't looked at them yet, if you could take a look at the proposal. And then I also noted, or well, I'm curious if it would be helpful to have a checklist or list of questions and sort of like reminders for things like posting an update or creating a survey to ensure that it reaches as many people as possible and that there's no valuable information missing. I kind of threw together an initial draft MR for some of those ideas, but wanted to gauge if that kind of idea would be helpful for people.
Yeah, ever since you started talking about this, I've been wondering if we want a like playbook for communicating changes.
That sounds good.
Like,
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, and it's more of a like, you know, how detailed and how thorough does it really want to be? Because we don't want to, you know, create too much process around, you know, things, but we can certainly put something together and then use it as we see fit.
yeah, I guess I was just thinking like announce in affected Slack channels, or like here's a list of some Slack channels you may want to think of, and maybe like put a note in Eng Week in Review or something. I don't know. It's something
Okay.
that we can work through. Is that already part of your process change thing? No. But
That's yeah. I have a list of channels and things like that in a different spot, so I'll kind of like combine that because it can all be in one place.
awesome. That's such a good idea. You are so smart. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks. But yeah, that's it from me for the most part. So if there's nothing else on those topics, we can move on to yours, Alex.
Thank you. We've gotten some feedback on this issue, which has been super great. And I haven't been able to incorporate all of it yet, but I'm going to start. I also started a questionnaire around trainee maintainership, and I am thinking that once that's had some responses, I'm going to kind of take all of that stuff together and make some proposals based on kind of all of this. So I think we're getting some good information. I think the questionnaire will reach a broader audience than just like general feedback on an issue. Well, which is why I stole the idea from Robert. Thank you, Robert. There is admittedly some overlap between my questionnaire and the one Robert made. So sorry to everybody who feels like they have to answer questions twice. But hopefully it's not that bad, and I don't know.
I think the only thing I would say to that is like if we think that we may have other questions, like if do we think we may have the need for other questionnaires for these issues, because if we think we do, then maybe we want to try combining some of those, just so that people aren't getting tons of questionnaires. But I think if the group feels like, all right, this might be the only other questionnaire, then yeah, I think that's fine. But I totally get what you mean by not wanting to overload people with those.
I expect I will want to send a follow-up questionnaire. And my thought about this was that I would use it to gauge acceptability of some proposals and basically send people a questionnaire that like has them rate some ideas as a follow-up, but it would have to be a follow-up thing. Maybe that's a terrible idea. I don't know. I'm just worried that if we send out issues again, like I think issues get traction from people who feel strongly, and I kind of want to hear from people who don't necessarily feel strongly too, because it may be that like one person super hates some idea, but everybody else is like, yeah, that's fine. So they don't feel strongly enough to say, yeah, that's fine. But like somebody is like morally opposed.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think the questionnaire is a good format. And I mean, and Robert's had really great responses. And I'm assuming that since people are so passionate about this topic, they're not going to view it as a chore to like answer more. I just wonder if, maybe we want to, before you send yours out, like, do you think maybe to just put a call out in the challenge and say, hey, does anyone else have questions they want to add as part of their issue or something? And then, if we need to send follow-ups to like, to get suggestions on things that come back from that one, I think that totally makes sense.
Yeah, I think having Robert and I collaborate, if he wants to do a follow-up survey, like having us collaborate on a single survey for follow-up probably makes sense anyway. So there's a lot of overlap there.
Cool.
So any other thoughts or questions on this? All right. Robert isn't on the call, but there are 82 responses to that survey so far. He wants to know if we need more or if we should shut it off for new responses and start consolidating the data. Nick, you also have a thing on here. Do you want to verbalize?
Yeah. I just added an issue to that exit criteria to gather feedback on approval settings changes. So I think I'll broadcast a little more widely this week. And I also talked to Kai about it a little bit, and we agreed to gather some data on suggestions usage in the GitLab project. And thanks, Alex, for walking me through how to use teleport for database access. So I'll probably try that out and see what kind of data we can gather.
I make absolutely no guarantees as to how well that actually works. I have never tried it. I have recommended it to several people who haven't yelled at me, so I assume it works. Or there are a bunch of people who just think that I have no idea what I'm talking about, which is also
I've used teleport
fine.
a few times, and it works well.
Yes.
Although I've been using it for Rails console access, not necessarily database access, but I expect it's just as good.
Awesome. That's all the recommendation I need.
Okay. Any other things on this one, or Nick, do you want to go on to exit criteria 1?
Yes. Yeah, so sent a message to EMs for feedback about the projects that we were proposing to focus on, and I didn't see any objections, so I think we'll just go ahead and focus on those 5 projects that we mentioned, which are GitLab, Workhorse, Shell, version, and customers dot. And I think within GitLab, it's sort of like 3 projects because we'll want to probably do some different things for backend, front end, and database. And so, yeah, my proposed next steps, and definitely welcoming feedback on this idea, but just to try to find representatives from each of those projects or maintainer types for the case of GitLab, and just get some qualitative and any quantitative feedback we can get about what the perceived coverage gaps are, what the targets are, and any ideas these representatives have to remedy the situation. And I was just thinking we can use the model that Alex used for database maintainer analysis as an example of some ways to look at this quantitatively, and to just think about how we might want to set goals for reviewers or maintainers. And yeah, my question is just, do we want to focus on maintainer coverage, or do we also want to include reviewers? Because I could see including review. I could see people saying, well, if we had more reviewers, maybe maintainers would have less of a burden. And so I could see for some of these that focusing on like increasing reviewers in whatever plans we come up with would be important. So just want to get some thoughts there.
Yeah, and I thought that was a good question. This is something I recently noticed. I posted in the working group, there's a new dashboard for looking at community contribution MRs. And one of the teams that was overloaded, I might be wrong, but I believe it was Runner, has like 30 or 40 MRs, community MRs, kind of waiting for review. And I looked, and there's only I want to say 9 or 10 combined reviewers and maintainers. So it definitely seems like the case where there might be some projects that just need more people that can review overall.
I was going to say, I also do have some examples for single maintainer projects that have just one type of maintainer, as opposed to the Rails project, which has like a bajillion. So like Omnibus, right? So they need to be handled slightly differently too, because MRs in those, so like for MRs in Omnibus, a lot of them get labeled as distribution, even if they're coming from other teams. They also get labeled as distribution if they're coming from the SRE group. So they have to work, they end up having to work a little differently than we have them work for database projects, because the database projects, we just look at the labels. And most of or back end or front end, right? We could just look at the labels.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for highlighting that. I think we can definitely use that as an example for some of those single maintainer type projects. And
we may also want to consider doing that just for the other types too, because it turns out like you can get like that. If it's a community contribution, it gets counted differently, right? It gets counted towards your broad MR as opposed to narrow MR. I don't know what the not narrow MR rate, right? So like they end up getting labeled for the groups that they're affecting rather than whereas the community contributor isn't a member of that group. So it's not like that group is contributing that code.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, that's an interesting case. And I think to your point, Steve, maybe we just want to leave it open-ended for now and just make it more general, like, we're looking at maintainers, but just what are your project's needs overall, and see what people say.
Yeah, I think checking with the projects makes sense. Or if we wanted to look at data, we could look at, how many MRs come in through given projects versus how many reviewers are available for those projects, to understand the different rates.
Yeah. Yeah, because do we have an issue, or because I know we have an issue, or one of the exit criteria is around metrics, but is that more for the actual trainee process, or is there a more general metrics gathering exit criteria? Let me just look at the agenda real quick. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, number 2, develop metrics to provide more transparency to the health of the maintainership program. So yeah, so it looks like maybe there's some overlap here with that exit criteria, and just trying to make sure that as we're developing this plan, we're getting the right, yeah, we're making sure that we also address this exit criteria too. Cool. I think that does it for my update, unless anyone has any other comments.
I got nothing. Are there any discussion questions or help people need that we want to add in now? I'll take the silence as a no. Yeah, Steve, if you want to take that follow-up for the communications playbook, that would be awesome. Is any other business? All right, I think we're done then. Good to see everybody, and have a really good day.
Bye, everyone.